there are 4 different types of Tawheed. Once you try to combine them together, or once you separate them, then the argument that we have or the debate begins to make sense to a degree. Number 1, Tawheed in essence. Tawheed al-Dhat, what they say in Arabic. That the essence of Allah, the nature of Allah is one. Then number 2 is Tawheed al-Sifat, which is the unity of attribute. Number 3 is the unity Tawheed al-Af'al, the unity of action. And 4th, the Tawheed fil Ibadah, which is when we pray, we have to direct or be mindful that we are offering the prayer to one God alone. Any multiplicity in our ibadah becomes shirk that we, in another time, we might be able to discuss it.
What's the 4th one again?
So Tawheed al-Dhat, which in essence God is one.
Yeah.
Tawheed al-Sifat, which God's attributes are one. Tawheed al-Af'al, which means God's actions are one. And Tawheed al-Ibadi in our prayers. There is no disagreement and there is a consensus between the entire Muslim community when it comes to the first and the last. They all agree that the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one, that of Allah is one, and in our prayer we cannot offer prayer to anything that is multiple. It has to be directed to one God. The debate or the differences of opinion between various schools of theology is regarding Tawheed al-Sifat and Tawheed al-Af'al. Within the Sunni school of theology, the Tawheed al-Sifat, that the character of Allah, attribute of Allah is one, is rejected by Ash'ari. And they say they choose 7 what they call Sifatul Kamal, which is Ilm, Qudra, and a number of other things. They put them together and they opt for what they call the eternal 8. That of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the essence of Allah, plus 7 of the characters. They are considered to be the 8 eternals. Mu'tazila, on the other hand, they accept Tawheed al-Sifat. But the way they interpret it when we come to talk about Shia understanding of it is slightly different from a Shia point of view. Tawheed al-Sifat from a Mu'tazila point of view is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no sifat at all. It's stripped of everything. It's pure, simple essence. So you want to call it sifat is part of the that, whatever it is, we have to accept that it is pure, simple issue. So when it comes to Tawheed al-Sifat, Mu'tazila accepts, Ash'ari rejects. When it comes to Tawheed al-Af'al, it's the reverse. Ash'ari accepts, Mu'tazila rejects. Ash'ari, they say every action emanates from the source, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and use this argument to move towards Jabr and predestination. That everything is dictated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because there's only one action comes out of the essence, that of one. And they cite a verse in the Holy Quran that says, وَمَا أَمْرُنَا إِلَّا وَاحِدًا. So when it comes to creation, there was one instruction given. And all the complexity that we see is the emanation of that one instruction. So, Sifat, Mu'tazila accept, Ash'ari reject. Af'al, Ash'ari accepts, and they say that all actions go ultimately to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah is the source of it, because then they want to use this as a preamble towards opting for predestination, that Allah Jabr, that Allah is literally decides everything. And from that angle they move towards the notion of adl and justice and so on to be removed. It doesn't make sense. Since we have already talked about sifat of Allah, attribute of Allah to be separate, and they are qadim, so notion that justice and so on to be as an attribute to be made as a frame of reference that we judge Allah's action, it's not acceptable. So instead of saying adl and justice is a frame that we can say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be just and cannot be unjust but should be just, says no, whatever Allah does becomes the source of justice. We cannot talk about justice that way. If Allah decides to take the Holy Prophet to Jahannam, nastajiru billah, then that's justice. If Allah decides to take the sinner to heaven and reward him, that's justice. Because we simply don't understand. So Tawheed al-Sifat Af'al, Mu'tazila reject, because Mu'tazilas believe in the free will. And they cannot accept that everything is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge, literally remote controlling everything, because they believe in the free will. Although they agree on the first and the last. But these two are debated. Shia, on the other hand, come with a unique interpretation of both Tawheed al-Sifat and Tawheed al-Af'al. When it comes to Tawheed al-Sifat, the Shias are in coherence with the Mu'tazili, that the Sifat there is a unity of Sifat, but not in the way that Mu'tazili is interpreted, that God doesn't have attributes. No, there are verses in the Holy Quran, إن لله الأسماء الحسنى, or few ليس كمثله شيء, and then other asma is related to it. So Shias believe that Sifat is Ainud Dhat. The attributes are in essence like part of the essence. So the essence of Allah contains with it the attributes.
Reflection, kind of?
Well, emanation, they say what we see in reality, that we refer to it as a part of beauty, kamal, jamal, etc. It's all emanation. And we move into now Arfan, the emanation of these attributes, what we see outside, as a reflection of Allah's attribute. But it's part of the essence. And the same way that we talk about Quran, we say in essence, as a word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is qadim in essence, but as manifestation they become hadith and created. Shia believes that anything that we classify as Jamal attribute or Kamal attribute, they are in essence qadim, but in reality, once they are manifested and in various things, realities outside become created. With regard to Af'al, Tawheed al-Af'al, again, they agree with Ash'ari this time, Shia, but different interpretation of Af'al. The Ash'ari move it's a political move or theological move that everything is related to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hence we have no free will. Shia say no, everything is related to Allah through causality, which allows lateral movement for free will to be effective in our life. While the cause and effect ultimately links to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but humans have a degree of power in being agents, human agency in creating various cause and effect. So these are the differences that exist between various schools of theology regarding Sifat and other things. I mean, if you look at verses in the Holy Quran, you have لله الأسماء الحسنى فادعوه بها. This is one of the things that the Shia use to try to explain that it seems to be two different types of understanding that the verses of the Holy Quran try to accept and reject. The discussion that we had last week, that the narrowness of the parameters of language to be able to explain, if in the process of trying to give attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we bring the essence down to human nature, where we begin to comprehend the way we comprehend attribute to ourselves, certainly Quran rejects and considers it to be shirk. This verse, وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءِ الْحُسْنَى فَادْعُوهُ بِهَا. Allah has the asma, the best attributes. Call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala according. وَذَرُوا الَّذِينَ يَلْحَدُونَ فِي أَسْمَائِهِ. Now this time, forget, dispense with those who bring a different meaning to the asma, clearly indicating that there are two different attributes or two different ways of thinking when it comes to attributing sifat of Jamal and Kamal to Allah. There is one that simply uses the language but fully conscious that even the best of language does not come close to explaining the essence of the attributes, and we have no other alternative but to use this limited form of language. The other one, you bring Allah down to level of human being, and you begin to use the language in the same manner that we use in describing ourselves. This one is rejected. The other one we have to accept. As a matter of fact, Ibn Abil Hadid talks in his commentary on Nahj al-Balagha that the first person that dwelled in this notion of Allah's attribute is Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You look at the number of sermons that he has in Nahj al-Balagha, talks about this configuration between when he talks about muttaqeen, mu'mineen, the way they understand Allah, Allah's attribute, and the way that mushrikeen and so on understand Allah's attributes. And he makes a distinction that one is acceptable, one is it has to be rejected. So, وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى فَادْعُوهُ بِهَا وَذَرُوا الَّذِينَ يُلْحِدُونَ فِي أَسْمَائِهِ سَيُجْزَوْنَ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. They are going to be accountable for what they have done. A distinct, clear mark and distinction between two different types of attributes. One accepts, one rejects. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. When it comes to the story of Genesis, we hear that clearly what this literally separated Adam from the Malaika was this knowledge that was given, that Malaika didn't have. There is a hadith in Allah Azza wa Jal 99 isman. Man da'a Allahu biha istajaba lahu. 99 names. There is a book, I believe Chitek might have contributed to it, but certainly the Urafa have made a number of comments about this, the 99 names. Said Hussein Nasr, if you have a book, the Heart of Islam, when it gets to the notion of Tawheed, discusses this. One of the professors in Chicago, what was his name, who died many years ago, a Pakistani professor, he has a book on Islam as well, Abdul Rahman. Again, if you look at his book on Islam and foundation of Islamic belief, when he talks about Tawheed, addresses some of these issues. That the concept of 99 names, etc., etc. But this hadith is clear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has 99 names, these are the names of attributes. Da'a, Josh and Kabir that we read, it again is full of these names. Mujir is full of these names. Mashlul, Da'a, Mashlul is full of these names. So the notion that we should not attribute any character, don't give any attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not acceptable. When we have a number of verses that Quran, verses themselves say that Allah has attributes. It's understanding how to attribute them, not being aware and conscious that if we say Allah is alim, the ilm and knowledge of Allah is unique, not in the same manner that we have it. We acquire knowledge is an external to our reality. Certainly this doesn't fit with Allah. When we say Allah is kamil, perfect, exactly what we mean by it. The kamal that we have in our own language and refer to it. Or is once we are aware of the limitation, and that the fact that we're really going back to your question, Brother Hussein, that we have no other alternative to use this language but be aware of it. This is why sometimes we need the infallibles to come and explain this reality again, because they all have to explain to us through the language or the medium that we understand, again, we have to be mindful that that language still has limitation. Khutbatul Muttaqeen or Hamam, when the person comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen and says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, describe to me who are the believers. So Imam at the beginning gives few description. He says, no, I'm not satisfied. Then Imam goes through a lengthy presentation of the character and the attributes of the true believers. And if you read it, their mind and so on, and the way they understand things, their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes beyond these senses and perception that we have. And they open the heart. When he is asked, do you worship, have you seen Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He says, yes. How can I worship God that I haven't seen? So how can you say that you have seen it? He says, not with your eyes. Then you literally have to go into a different domain to be able to understand Allah. And look at this Khutbatul Muttaqeen or Khutbat Hamam, and you see how Imam goes through pain to use the language to describe things that the language in essence and fails to give justice to. So you have to keep adding things to it. Adjective, pronouns, nouns, verbs, and so on, to make it presentable so that the person comprehends. And then once the person comprehends, he lost his life. Mm-hmm. Because Imam said, I was afraid of this. Once your limit, Imam can understand it because of his infallibility and the elevated spirit that he has. But ordinary human being, once they get close, simply they cannot take it.
What do you mean by that specifically?
By what?
That how can they not take it? Like
they just simply no. It's when you try to describe it to them. If the heart is open, and they begin to visualize. He was asked, "How كيف أصبحت?" Imam tells him. He says, "I have woken up when I can see the hissing of the fire. I can feel the hissing of the fire, and I can hear the song of heaven. I can see people congregating. I can see my amal and my actions are all around. I can see akhirah and dunya all at the same time." These kind of people are very unique. They can understand it. And then they understand the enormity of the responsibility that they have. But we mortals, we go through the narratives and we really don't comprehend. We don't understand what it means, Tawheed al-Dhat, the essence of Allah to be one. What is Tawheed al-Sifat? The essence to be, the Sifat and the attributes to be the same in the essence. How can we combine the unity and the multiplicity together? What does it mean for one action to be the source of this multiplicity and complexity? So those who work hard and begin through this struggle, jihad and so on, transcend the physical reality and begin to open up their mind and their hearts to the transcendent being, they begin to see things that we don't. They begin to feel things that we don't. They begin to act in a way that we don't. The story of Khidr and Musa in Quran is a classic example. Once you reach a point in which you communicate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you become the medium by which the causality works, Musa simply couldn't tolerate. He constantly tried to judge Khidr's action through the medium that he was familiar with, the legalistic medium that he was familiar with. How can you kill a child? You might as well, they didn't accept you as a guest, you might as well charge them for it. How can you make a hole in a ship? It doesn't belong to you. You see, the legal mindset. But the answer comes it's a different world. You operate within different parameters. So people who this is why we have a number of ahadith that clearly say, try to go as far as you can, but there are certain limits that you have to give up and simply appeal to the mystery. Say, there is nothing I can do beyond this. Even philosophers, they would go through this, hammer it out, and ultimately they reach a point that I cannot explain beyond this. And this is not what the true essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So as human beings, whatever language, if we are mindful that whatever language we use is simply it's playfulness of the mind so we can comprehend a little bit more. There is nowhere near explaining the essence of Allah or attributes of Allah. This is acceptable. Mental gymnastic. But if we bring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala down and we say, okay, the same way that I attribute various characters to us individuals, Jamal, Kamal, Qudra, power, etc., etc., in the same manner I project it to Allah, definitely it's shirk. Because it's not the same. You acquire knowledge. Does that mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala acquires knowledge? If you say Allah is alim, Allah is qadir, qudra, what the source of power and so on comes from where? And within us, it's different type that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I strongly recommend that you still give it some time, and because next week inshallah we're going to deal with how Urafa that go beyond this narrative of language, go now into the feeling, explain the attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or how see it, they visualize it. Their language is totally different from the ordinary, say, mutakallimin or a theologian or a mutahaddithin or anybody else, because they mutakallimin or theologian, they rely on narratives, words. Urafa talk of feeling. When the verse in the Holy Quran says that on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to punish a number of people. لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ بِهَا. They had hearts that they never used. They had eyes that they never used. They had ears that they never used. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not referring to this physical senses. It talks about that spiritual dimension that has a reality the same way that the physical dimension has a reality. Your physical being has eyes, ears, and so on. Your spirit has eyes and ears. That once you connect with the spirit, it takes you in a different field. In Hawza, I had seen a number of these scholars. Hardly anybody could associate with them because of their connection.
Associate?
Yeah, because they could see. People would run away from a number of scholars because they could tell you exactly what is your nature.
They saw through you.
Yeah, they see through you. Sayyid Jamal Gulpaigani, when he went to Iraq, this story narrated by his son, Sayyid Muhammad Sayyid Jamal, who used to pray in Imam Ali Mausoleum in Najaf, said, when my father came from Isfahan to Iraq, through spiritual training and so on, he had reached a point in which he could look at the human being and see the true nature, see through them. So the first day that he walked into the haram, he looked around and he said, I only saw 5 human beings. The rest were dogs. What happened here? Dogs, monkeys, and so on. So I immediately realized what is going on. And I asked Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu alayhi wa take this power from me, because I can't live like this when you would constantly look around and what do you see? That dimension is totally different from this. We see the same thing, the same story is being narrated from Imam Zain al-Abidin sallallahu alayhi in one of the pilgrimages, when Abu Hamza Thumali talks to the Imam and says, he sees the numbers and he says, Ma akthar al-hajij. And Imam responds very quickly, Ma akthar al-dhajij wa aqall al-hajij. Sound bites are a lot, but true humans that come for Hajj is very few. You want to see it? Abu Hamza says, Imam just waved his finger in front of my eyes and suddenly I looked. Only few human beings. The moment of creation certainly messed up the life of the Malaika completely and created a conundrum for them. Now you have a reality in front of you that has two dimensions. It has the physical dimension and it has a spiritual dimension. If this reality pays attention to the spiritual dimension at the expense of the material dimension, reaches where the angels cannot go. But if he or she pays attention to the material dimension at the expense of the spiritual dimension, asfal as-safilin, lower than beast. So that spiritual dimension, unfortunately, we don't pay attention to. And this is why Mullah Sadra, for example, in his philosophy comes up, and there are a number of scholars after him, that understanding this fact, the language fails, the philosophical language fails to explain true meaning of things, and you need to go through what we call spiritual jihad and be enlightened by the source of all being for you to be able to understand and explain certain things. So when it comes to the concept of Tawheed, his tafsir, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, he spends the whole book on just explaining Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Most scholars, whether contemporary or in previous generations, they did the same thing. Even philosophers, they had Allama Tabatabai, Marhum Imam Khomeini, and a number of others. Once they went ahead with their theological and education, they've reached a point where they needed to go into the spiritual dimension and then combine them together. Their assessment of situation is different from those who purely look at it from material perspective. Attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the nature, the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the action of Allah, even ibadah is going to change. Allahu Akbar, your mind travels around the world. Technically, you have done your prayer. But whether this is the prayer that is supposed to be ascension to heaven, Inna salata mi'rajul mu'min. These people who do it naturally totally have different understanding of character, Allah's attribute and character when it comes to referring to Allah. They are not the same as us. So when we say Lillah al-asma al-husna, fad'uhu biha, means in that way. وَذَرُوا الَّذِينَ يُلْحِدُونَ. Ilhad means kufr, means bringing concept of duality and so on into the whole argument. So you are bringing, literally bringing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala down to the level of human being. And then try to understand the same Jamal and Kamal. It doesn't make sense. This is kufr, shirk. We have it in our Shia community, concept of shafa'ah. A concept of shafa'ah that is rejected because it's shirk. And there is a concept of shafa'ah that is pure, that complements everything else. If you ask ordinary people to describe to you the shafa'ah, you have a problem. If Imam Hussein is there, he's killed, and for our sins to be forgiven, that's a Christian concept brought into Islamic terminology, and Imam Hussein Jesus was replaced by Imam Hussein. When we have a hadith about crying for Imam Hussein washes the spirit, etc., it's a different concept. It's not the way we simplistic approach to it. So these are I still recommend, if you have time, to go through these books. Sister, you went through Shia Anthology. If you have time to go through the other book, and Brother Hussein, you went through God Attributes, go through the other book and see the language and the understanding that they have. Then if you have any question, and you sister try one of them,
Sure.
inshallah, because I want questions to come up, since it was proposed, a question to come up and hopefully would help in our understanding.
I should have a question. The physical being is directly linked with the spiritual being, correct?
Yes.
So when you choose not to listen to music, that's going to strengthen your spiritual,
Correct.
So there's this hadith that those that walk to Imam Hussein, the sun purifies them. It's not purifying their physical being, it's purifying their spiritual being.
Well, to a degree it's correct, but if you constantly sin, that small purification that might happen and enlighten you, to awaken you, will be eliminated very quickly. See, soul searching and purification happen in two ways. Eliminating certain things, not doing certain things, and then doing certain things. So by not committing sin and then doing certain things. If you look at the concept of Tawbah from Nahjul Balagha's point of view, it says, Amir al-Mu'minin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when somebody said, Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh, Imam comes up with 6 different parts to Tawbah or repentance. First of all, says that a clear, the true repentance or Tawbat al-Nasuh begins with what we call a clear determination or regret of the past. That's the first step. As long as there is no regret of the past, there is no Tawbah. The second one is a clear determination that I'm not going to go to the past and I want to move forward. Then once this takes place, then the next stage is to look at huququllah, huququl nas. So you are despondent and regretful of the time and life that has been wasted, and you have a clear determination to move forward and change your life. These are the two. Then huququllah wa huququl nas, that you have to do, the right of people and the right of Allah. When we know that listening to certain musics are sin, and we don't listen to them. By not listening is a step in the right direction. But by itself is not enough if we don't do something positive to complement it. So jihad has both negative and positive direction. A person that comes to Majalis Azaa and cries certainly gets some enlightenment because of the fact that he is present in such a gathering. But if walks out and then does all kinds of sins, is going to literally, the vector theory, positive, negative, mutually destroy each other. So what you have is that the end result is going to be more negative rather than that small amount of positive compared to the huge amount of the negative. The misconception is that I can do whatever I like outside, but the mere fact that I'm present here and I cry, that's it. All the sins are washed and I can start all over again. There is no such thing. And unfortunately, this is one of the greatest issue when it comes to commemoration or commiseration of Ashura, that the contemporary, what I call it, folklore, has shifted the meaning of it, and a concept which was supposed to be liberative, encouraging people for social justice, standing up against evil, etc., has been turned purely as a celebration of a tragedy, which is part of the whole incident, goes without saying. But which one we should give more preference and more important? So what you say, it's correct. When you are present in any, there are hadith that be present, make sure that at least once or twice in your week you go and sit with ulama and knowledgeable, because their way of life may entice or encourage you to change your way of life. You might be mu'adha or something that would make you convince and reflect upon your life. But if you don't learn any lessons from them, and you come out and continue with your life, that small positive enlightenment is not going to last that long if everything else is negative.
Yeah, it just goes without saying that if I'm present within, maybe that's just me, but if you're at the majlis or if you're going to mosques or anywhere that supports ibadah, wouldn't that make you naturally gravitate to change your way of life?
To change way of life, you need to make a decision, which is you can create the cause. The presence in a mosque cannot be a cause substitution. It can be an encouragement. It can remind you that you have a responsibility. You can remind you that this life that we have chosen is not going to the right way. But whether I want to change my life after seeing few signs, it depends on me, whether I make it. So those who say that you can go to anyone, the more you go, the better it is. Hopefully the penny drops, that look, I've done 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, I really have nothing to account for these for a number of years. If tomorrow Israel comes and let's go. It might encourage you to reflect and ponder, but how many people ponder and then walk out as if nothing has happened? Change requires decision, and decision requires action. By simply being present in a mosque and listening to a lecture, this is why scholars or individuals that they want to go through this spiritual journey, they pick up a master to guide them through it, constantly, day in, day out, to control their life, to give them direction, what they're supposed to do, what they are not supposed to do, etc., etc. Because you have this inner nafs ammara that is constantly there to bring you down and hold you down. You have the sin, which is easy and comfortable. It goes to your liking. You construct a lifestyle. Pray. Why do I have to pray? Fast. Why do I have to fast? Just wander around, do nothing. Listen to me. Why? It is enjoyable, etc. Sin for people who are on our level is an enjoyable lifestyle. You need to restrain yourself, to force the nafs of Ammara not to do them. And then Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu alayhi has a very pertinent point, very important and poignant point. It says, finally, at the end of all these, the flesh that you gained through allowing nafs ammara to dictate your life, that flesh has to be dissolved completely against the nafs ammara. You dissolve that flesh to bone and skin. And now you have full control of nafs ammara and allow the flesh to start building up again. If you look at all grand scholars, just before their death, they went through an extensive, one of them is Marhum Sheikh Mushtaba Tahrani, my own professor in Tehran. Suddenly, as if he felt that this is the last year of his life. Completely, his lectures changed, his attitude to life changed. Not that it was bad before, no, he became more severe. And then just before he died, 2 weeks before he died, I saw a picture of him, literally bone and skin. So, and the lecture that he gave last Ramadan before his death, everyone who came out, I listened to it online, everyone who came out with a clear understanding that Marhum is gone into a different level. He was preparing for the departure. We don't understand that. I remember when I was a teenager, I used to go to his lecture in Tehran. He was extremely pious, extremely respectful, clearly understood where he was. It wasn't as if he was sinful, very simple lifestyle in Tehran. But this one, as if you turn the life, you go up a gear and in preparation for the departure. For us, we really need to be constantly in that state of mind. God consciousness that we say, the meaning of taqwa, where God-centric is not something that switch on and off, and simply come to the mosque, be reminded of it, and then you go out as if nothing has happened. It's in a condition that you have to be in it all the time. Starts with some what we call spark. Whether we go back to the desire and wish and make a decision to change, it's hard to come by. We go through the month of Ramadan and we don't do anything about it, with all the advantages created for us. Nothing. Go through fasting, nothing. So the mere presence in a mosque or religious establishment or mausoleums and so on, by itself is not going to change if we don't make a decision ourselves and we begin to look for steps towards change and shifting, eliminating things that are corrupting and destroying our lives out of the whole formula. It's difficult, but, well, we have to struggle. When Adam was sent down or kicked out of heaven, wherever that heaven was, that's a different argument, clearly instructed. Now you have to deal with this reality. Your nafs, and call it shaitan, that knows all your weaknesses. If you look at the narrative, they interpreted that shaitan suddenly, Adam and Eve were exposed in front of shaitan. What? Exposed physically? No. Shaitan realized where the weaknesses are. Then with full confidence can stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and says, I will misguide them until the end of time. The answer, go ahead. But those who truly believe, and Allah is in the heart, you cannot change. Where do we stand? This is the continuum. Shaitan or Allah? Once we move towards that direction, then our notion and perception and understanding of all the reality changes. The concept of sifat and that and everything else falls into perspective. We see it differently. The lens shift, what they call shift in consciousness.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
You mentioned that the Imam was explaining God to a man and he died because he couldn't...
Sifat al-Muttaqeen, explaining who are the true believers.
Oh, okay.
If you go to Nahj al-Balagha, read the Khutbat Humam or Sifat al-Muttaqeen, you see it. That he comes, but you cannot be truly, concept of taqwa is to be God-centric. Naturally, if you're trying to define the true believer, the pious and the true God-centric individual, you have to bring the concept of God into the whole thing. And talk about this dynamic relationship between this individual that you're trying to describe them with the source of being.
So my question is, how were these men that you were talking about, the ones that can see the soul, basically. How could they comprehend it?
I don't know. Because they never, if you went to their lectures, they still used language. But they, right from the beginning, they made it clear that you need to go beyond the language and start some what we call jihad of spirituality and so on.
So were they strong? Are they stronger than that man who actually died from hearing, or maybe that man understood it even better than them?
It's possible. It's possible. But after the khutbah of Hammam, somebody stands up and says, "Look, if this man understood it and he dropped dead, why are you still standing?" See the logic?
Mm-hmm.
Imam said, there are things that we understand. It's because of their nature, the infallibility of the nature.
Did not God create them because they were the only ones, the 14, that could comprehend Him?
Well, if we move into this notion that God created them unique, they cannot be the role model. If God creates individual unique, separate from the rest of the world, they were created unique, so why should be the role model for us? Any faith, any ideology that fails to deliver a fully complete role model for its adherents fails to succeed in guiding humanity. The verse in the Holy Quran says that from among you, we send messengers among you from people who eat like you, act like you, etc., etc. This is an akhbari concept that says that they were created unique. If they were created unique, we are opening a Pandora's box. They cannot become the role model for us.
Is infallibility not unique?
Infallibility unique, but through action, the person's action, or creation. They're two different things. If I'm going to present this image as the complete image, that if you follow these commands, you'll get to it. How can I say if you follow this command, you'll get to this, where this person is not has not followed the command? It was just created that way. The argument fails.
So how do we explain the purification verse?
They struggled. The Holy Prophet ﷺ says that even my nafs ammara converted to Islam, as a metaphorical way. Even my nafs converted to Islam. Even I have such a full control over my nafs that my nafs has no power whatsoever.
So the Prophet has a nafs al-ammara bisu?
Yes. If we say that these people went up through a personal deed, not just created that way. If you remove nafs ammara, we go towards creation. But if we give them the credit that they really struggled through this themselves. Yes, they were individuals that were chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but because of that jihad and struggle. Why should he go through all this pain of fasting, prayer, late at night, Salat al-Layl? Amir al-Mu'mineen goes to work in the field, and then somebody comes to his hut, and they say, "Where is he?" He's outside working. The guy goes to this bustan or field, and they says, comes back quickly to Fatima Zahra. He's dead. He said, "No, mahlan, wait. He's not dead. He's gone through this mental process of falling unconscious because of his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." If they were, this is the struggle that they went through. Abu Hamza comes to Mecca and finds Imam Zain al-Abidin, Imam Sajjad, literally unconscious close to Kaaba. And he thought that he's dead. So he picks his head and puts it in his lap and starts crying. Tears from his eyes drop on Imam's face, and Imam suddenly wakes up and criticizes Abu Hamza for bringing him out of that state. And Abu Hamza says, "Ya Rasulullah, you are the grandson of the Holy Prophet, son of Hussein, and so on. if you are doing this, what chance do we have? Imam says, this is the one, what I said. Forget about, dispense with the notion of family relationship. On the day of judgment, I will be asked for my action, for my deed, not for whom I'm related to. This is the Ma'asum says that.
Mm-hmm.
So the notion that somehow they went through this, they worked as hard as possible, they struggled, but they succeeded.
So they weren't born infallible?
No, I don't believe. I mean, it doesn't make sense that somebody is born infallible.
So you reject the hadith by the tafsir for Surah An-Nur from Sheikh Kulayn?
Yes.
You reject that?
Well, that's his understanding of it. My understanding is different. We differ, or we agree to disagree. I refuse to accept somebody who has been born different from me to become the role model, because he or she doesn't understand my pain, cannot guide me through it because he hasn't gone through it. But when I see what they have done in their life, clearly indicates that this struggle is constant.
So based on that line of thinking, you could say infallibility is attainable by regular humans.
If we work as hard as that they do. The problem is they have this unique characteristics within them that they really worked harder than anybody else could imagine. Holy Prophet ﷺ says, no prophet went through the pain that I went through.
Yeah, I thought it was, maybe I interpreted it different, but it's concerning.
Yes, you can interpret it as a physical reality in his life, dealing with others, but at the same time, it's mutlaq. And the concept of itlaq doesn't specify this physical or spiritual dimension. Why should the Holy Prophet comes to one of his disciples who fasts all the time and given everything out and so on? He says, I fast one day and I don't fast the other. I have a family life I deal with, but at the same time, you see, our understanding of ibadah is slightly different. Once you reach a state of mind where God is there all the time, everything that you do becomes ibadah. Amir al-Mu'mineen is praying, and during the ruku' realizes that there is a poor person needs help, extends his finger for him to take the ring. What did happen? Came out of one ibadah? No. One state of ibadah into another state of ibadah. But because God is present in his life all the time, and whatever he does for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all his breathing becomes ibadah, sleep becomes ibadah, action, fighting becomes ibadah, even working in the field becomes ibadah. For us, we think because God is absent, we really need to go through this ritual to slowly bring back Allah into the equation. This is why there is a hadith says, ask Allah for taqwa and then use it to become muttaqi. That because God is absent, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us that enlightenment that becomes part of our life, then use it to become God-centric through struggle and jihad.
If a person does not necessarily have access to complete knowledge, but they do try their very best, and not just try their best as in working hard, but in a way that maybe the Imam couldn't criticize them, but they don't have access to proper knowledge, can they still, is there something within them or something that God will compensate them to still reach a level of perfection even though knowledge was lacking, but intention wasn't lacking?
Well, we have two concepts in usul and fiqh, Jahil al-Qasir and Jahil al-Muqassir. Jahil al-Qasir means somebody, due to force of circumstance, he or she is an environment where the intention is not lacking, but what is available for him or her is not perfect. He will be rewarded for his action and his struggle. He will not be punished for things that could have made his life perfect if they were to be available. Jahil al-Muqassar is somebody that all the options are available, knowledge, guidance, and everything else, consciously decides to remain in ignorance. It's not the same as the first one.
Is the internal state the same as the two good people from those two camps?
Not necessarily. Jahil al-Muqassar means I consciously have decided not to to remain in ignorance. So ignorance is self-inflicted.
But for the good from those two camps, from the one who has access to knowledge and the one who doesn't have access to knowledge, and they both have the good intention.
Yeah.
Is their internal state the same?
Well, for what he has achieved, he will be rewarded. But he will not be, or she will not be punished for things that could have been achieved but didn't. But this person, that Muqassar, will be punished for things that could have been achieved that willfully he or she didn't.
Yes.
There are two different types. The library is available. The person is available. The lectures are available. Willfully I stay at home, watch TV because I don't want to know. I'm afraid of the consequence. It affects my lifestyle. There's a story about whether it's true or not. Rumi talks about this. It says that a young boy was taken to school. So my parents understood him to be clever, intelligent, no problem with his understanding. So he goes to school and sits on the chair, and the teacher tells him to say Aleph. He refuses to say Aleph. So a couple of days until force comes in, he refuses to say. The teacher brings back the parents and say, this is unusual. Finally, they try to talk to him and say, why don't you say it? He said, the problem is, if I say Aleph, it's not going to end with Aleph. I have to say Ba, I have to say Ta, and I have to continue till the end of it. So he uses this as a metaphor, as a simile with the lifestyle that we choose in our life. We are not prepared to commit because we choose a lifestyle, and we know any commitment outside this lifestyle, it means we have to continue somewhere else. So the person who willfully remains in ignorance, he will be punished for things that he could have attained, but he didn't because of willful neglect. The person that willfully had the will, but due to force of circumstance wasn't available, he would not be punished for it, but he certainly would be rewarded for what he does. So inshallah, next week we will try. We may have problem next week because I just called this afternoon around 2:30 by Islamic Center here that they have a fundraising next week, and they want me to be the main speaker. So I may have problem unless we are prepared to making it a little bit earlier or a little bit later. So my 15 minutes could finish within say if they start at 3:30 by 4, and then we can have a program. You decide.
We could do earlier, or we could do later.
I don't mind. I mean, I lecture in the morning now, every Sunday morning here for families that get together. After the lecture, which is about 12 o'clock, I have nothing. I can do the prayer and we can meet here at 1 and go through it, and then I stay here for the afternoon lecture. Or any other time.
We could do
1 o'clock? Okay. Inshallah. So if you could tell whoever wants to, again, we meet here until they give me some other place. But for the time being, we meet here. Please spend some time
Of course.
reading.
It's just concerning
unique creation or infallibility. So does that make the Mahdi status among us attainable?
Well, we have already got one.
Yeah, so...
What do you mean by status?
So, like the Sunni view is that a Mahdi will be born.
Yeah.
And then he'll work.
Ultimately, the name is given to him, and this person goes through the struggle and reaches that point, ultimately, where he has a responsibility. Allah has knowledge that this person is capable enough. He will be the person. Why is it that Imam has a number of children? One is identified as capable of doing it. The others are not. It's not because of their creation. Because of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that the struggle that this individual goes through reaches the point. They have some unique characters, no doubt. They are better able to absorb knowledge, some knowledge granted by them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I cannot accept somebody being totally shielded from the rest of humanity, created differently, no sin, no pain of sin, nothing as well, and become a role model for us sinners. My mind doesn't accept it. You may accept it. That's your prerogative.
But you don't believe that the Mahdi will be born. You already believe he is.
No, I already believe that Mahdi is already born.
Okay.
And is there. What I'm saying is these individuals were not created, in a sense, infallible from the moment that they came. When the Holy Prophet ﷺ says, I struggled hard even to my nafs ammara to convert my nafs ammara to Islam. My nafs ammara has become a Muslim. Is a metaphor. That I worked hard to subdue the nafs. Then, yes, he understands what everybody else is going through.
So
why is it that he prays sometimes for those who fall short? Because they are doing their best at the time. They ask Allah, just give them a little bit more push. Cause substitution here.
The hadith where they open the Prophet's heart and take the blackness out of it. What do you make of that?
First of all, I have to check the chain and see whether the chain is worthy or not. And then, I do not interpret these literally. I use them metaphorically.
It's a Sunni hadith, but...
Yeah, I mean, no, there are a lot of hadith that within what we call people use them. There are a number of hadith about Ashura. Just go and read Marhum Mutahari's book regarding Ashura and see how many of them are fabricated. So it doesn't mean that we should accept all of them. Being critical thinker, sister, is that you look at things. Forget about what other people say. Within the knowledge that I have, does it make sense? Now let's discuss it. First, we look at the chain. Is it trustworthy? If there are weaknesses, reject them. And then there is a hadith from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, whatever you hear from us, present it to Quran. If it makes sense, accept it. Or present it to the aql. If it makes sense, accept it. Otherwise, reject it. We look at a hadith within what we call totality of the whole anthology that we are going to follow. It doesn't make sense for somebody that has no perception, no comprehension of sin, to take the moral high ground and tell people who have to constantly go through this conflict between nafs ammara and nafs lawama what to do.
So have they sinned or have they never sinned?
Sinned what?
The infallibles. Have they committed sins that they know?
What we believe is that they haven't committed sins. But the difference is whether they are born sinless or whether they attain sinlessness.
Okay.
These are two different understandings of it, or reading of the material.